Good evening. This is Heartstock Radio, and I'm your host, Carol Murphy. We are in the midst of a giant thunderstorm here, and the lights just flickered. I'm sure we won't lose power, but just in case, if we do, we'll be right back. And also remember that you can email us at heartstockradio@gmail.com, and you can find us on Facebook. This evening, our wonderful guest is Rhonda Collins, and she is the co-founder of Toycycle. In just a moment, Rhonda will be with us and tell us all about what she is up to. Thanks for listening to Heartstock.
But on the other side, it didn't say nothing. That side was made for you and me. This land is your land. This land is my land. From California to Rhode Island, from redwood forests to the Gulf Stream waters. This land was made for you and me. This land was made for you and me.
This is Heartstock Radio, and our guest this evening is Rhonda Collins. Hi, Rhonda.
Hi, Carol. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being our guest. Can you give our listeners a brief intro here of what Toycycle is and your role at the company?
Sure. So Toycycle is a new marketplace for buying and selling used toys and baby gear. And I am a co-founder and CEO.
So tell our listeners, I know one of the things that we want to weave in here is your recent pivot. Can you tell us just a little bit about your co-founder and how you came up with the idea for your company?
Oh, okay, sure. Well, I'll go back a little bit and tell you about myself. I actually have always been a very thrifty reuser, and I learned that from my mother. Growing up in Oregon, my mom was recycling before there was anything like curbside recycling, and she taught me to take care with resources and be conservative in my use of them. And I have always been that way. One of my favorite things has been wilderness backpacking, precisely because you go with so little, you live on so little, you carry only what you need on your back, you pack out what you pack in, and I just love that aspect of it. Late in life, I had children. I had twins. And I am here to say that despite my values and my efforts at a more minimal lifestyle, I was really just overwhelmed and could not resist the flood of gear and toys and clothing and everything that comes with having small children. And so at a certain point, I felt like it was so challenging for me to figure out what to do, how to be engaged in reuse, and what to do with all of these things, how to acquire things that were not new. And there are different ways for doing that. There are certainly plenty of ways that people can attempt to do that, but they're not particularly convenient, and oftentimes it's really challenging for a new mom to have the bandwidth to, tackle that. So I really wanted to create something to help families with this. And our first effort was a peer-to-peer platform, very much like FreeCycle. I don't know if your listeners might be familiar with FreeCycle, but that's a platform where people can just give away anything, and they can get anything from neighbors or people in their own town. And I wanted to have one specifically for toys and baby gear. And so we started that. That was the first Toycycle here in the San Francisco Bay Area. And what we found was that it worked well for some people, and it didn't work at all for a lot of others, despite their enthusiasm for reuse. They wanted to take advantage of this opportunity, but they just didn't have the time or the bandwidth. So our recent pivot was yet another effort to make it even more convenient. So now what we do is full service consignment here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we intend to grow this to other areas. We come pick up your stuff. We handle everything about the sale of that item. We make those items available to families across the U.S. in an e-commerce type of platform. So we're offering super convenience with used baby gear and toys and clothing.
In just a moment, we'll go deeper into that because there's some really cool aspects of this. And on your website, I know that you talk a lot about plastics, and that's a big deal these days.
Yeah.
But can you share with us a little bit about your education? And I know that you had kind of a previous professional life that was much different than Toycycle.
Yes. Yeah, well, actually, my college degree is in art, fine art. I was a painter early in life. And interestingly, I found at a certain point that it wasn't satisfying my need to be more socially engaged and do something with my art. And so I moved into media, video and film. And that offered me the opportunity to tackle issues and talk about, pressing needs and concerns of our society and our environment and so forth. And I've had really the great privilege of working on a number of really wonderful documentaries, some of which are about the environment and others about our food chain and so forth. And that has been a really fulfilling career for me, actually. I've worked in that field for 20 years. And then just more recently in life, as I said, this problem, which was my own problem, and I knew was a problem for many other families that I was familiar with, I just wanted to solve it. So I guess my entrepreneurial side came out at this point, and I wanted to do something that would really have a very direct impact.
And it sounds like you kind of had a social entrepreneurial bend yourself early on, even doing the documentaries that you were working on. Can you share with us a little bit more about your interest in the environment and what some of those documentaries were?
Yes, I did work on a film which was really satisfying for me quite a while ago now, probably 15 years ago. It was called Oil on Ice. And it was about the mad drive to drill for oil in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, which is back with us. This is not a problem that's gone away.
Yeah.
And so that documentary was about the people of Alaska and the animals of Alaska and the impact of oil drilling in that area. And it was a really wonderful opportunity for me. Making documentaries has always been, coming to a new subject where I perhaps have almost no knowledge and learning a lot about it through the work, and that's been great. So I think my desire to preserve the environment has to have stemmed from my growing up in Oregon and my mother's own values on that front. And again, as I said, I love the wilderness. I love the pristine nature of the wilderness, and I want to preserve that. And I think there's something that happens also when you have children, and you certainly don't have to have children to care about the environment, but when you do have them, gosh, the pressing need is so much greater, because now these little beings who you love more than anything are going to live in that world. And so I just found myself caring so much more about what's happening to our environment, especially with plastics and overconsumption.
Indeed. And you have a co-founder, right?
Yes, I have two co-founders, actually. One of my co-founders is here in the Bay Area with me, and we've been colleagues and creative collaborators for many years now. Kathleen is engaged in this project as well, and is in fact our sustainability officer. Her concern for the environment and sustainability matches mine, perhaps even exceeds it, and she's really committed to what we're trying to do. And we also have a technical co-founder who is a father of 3, and he is actually from Pakistan and resides in Pakistan. So we have a remote co-founder on our team.
So when I went to your website, I saw your video with the Barbie dolls.
Yes.
And I just loved it. Who came up with that idea?
Well, I came up with the idea. I mean, as I said, I've worked in documentary film for a couple of decades, actually.
It shows.
So it was pretty natural to try and do some storytelling in that medium.
Oh.
And Kathleen, who has also worked in the documentary filmmaking field, helped out with that a lot.
So you kind of touched on this already. The overreaching mission of your company is to
reduce waste, prevent toys and baby gear from ending up in landfill.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other aspects of that, as we know. I mean, when you think about circular consumption, it isn't just waste ending up in the landfill. It's the environmental cost of manufacturing more and more new products for people to consume. So, our view, it's pretty simplistic actually. If we can get people buying used products rather than new products, then that saves all of that environmental impact of the production of new products, and it prevents those used products from ending up in the landfill. So it's on both sides a positive impact that we hope to achieve.
And I don't know if you have any statistics on this or not, but I would imagine that there's a huge percentage of children's toys, games, products, etc., that are plastic.
Huge. 90% of the toys manufactured are made from plastics, which are not easily recyclable. I have at times said are not recyclable, but the truth is they're not easily recyclable, which means effectively they are not recycled. Most municipal recycling facilities do not have the equipment needed to recycle the plastics that toys are made of. And while I have this information and statistics on the toy industry, I don't have it for baby gear, but I think it's safe to assume that an overwhelming majority of baby gear are made with the same types of plastics, and so it's the same problem there.
Mm-hmm. So we're at that halfway point, and we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with Rhonda Collins of Toycycle. Good evening. This is Heartstock Radio, and I'm your host, Carol Murphy. This evening, we have with us Rhonda Collins of Toycycle. Hi again, Rhonda.
Hi, Carol.
So all of this has a pretty significant impact on families.
Yes.
Can you talk about that aspect of it just a little bit?
Yeah, I feel really strongly that there are a number of ways that the plastic pollution problem and consumption need to be solved. And it's not entirely on the individual consumer to solve the problem. I feel like we need to have more choices and things need to be made easier for us. As a mom myself, I so understand that many families, we've got 2 parents working outside of the home. We've got kids to drop off at school, and we've got to do this and we've got to do that, and it can be so overwhelming. And to find that just extra piece of bandwidth to spend searching for a used item in the same way that you might search on Amazon, let's say, for a used item. I mean, we have the capacity for extraordinary convenience purchasing new items. Literally, go online, do a quick search, order it, and it's delivered to your door in a couple of days. And while there are many different platforms for purchasing and for selling used items, typically they don't offer the same type of convenience. So what I really want to do is I want to enable families to be able to engage in reuse, because I know they want to. I know that families care about the environment that their children are growing up in. So I'm trying to make this as convenient as it is to go to Amazon and purchase something new.
Okay, so let's get down to the nuts and bolts of how your platform works, or maybe we should talk a little bit more about your initial vision and then what influenced you to pivot. What was it like before, and what direction are you going now?
Right, well, before it was a peer-to-peer platform and people were swapping with one another, and that did work for some people, but not for most, because, again, the onus was on each individual, and it did require a certain amount of time to post an item for free or to search for an item and determine whether the person who had it lived close enough to you to make it worth your time. And it didn't have the convenience. So we pivoted to what is fundamentally an e-commerce store. We are consigning, meaning we're getting used toys and baby gear in excellent condition from families in the Bay Area. We pick these items up from them, and we handle everything, including the inspection and the cleaning and the vetting, to make sure that they're really quality products. And then we've put them into an online store for anyone across the country to browse and purchase from. We can deliver locally and we can ship nationwide. We're making every effort to be as sustainable as possible in our packaging materials and shipping. So we're hoping that the convenience of our service will encourage more and more families, or certainly enable more and more families to engage in reuse, and thus, have a positive impact on the environment.
And how is it evolving as far as your customer base goes and your early users? Do you have like a customer profile?
Well, our users and our customers are families with young kids. So typically the inventory that we have on hand now is age range 0 to, say, 4 years. And I think it's interesting that we have so much of that inventory, because that is exactly the age range where kids are growing so quickly. Oftentimes newborns get a lot of gifts from family and from baby showers, and parents maybe overbuy because they're first-time parents and they're not sure how much they need or so forth. And families end up with a lot of excess, unused, outgrown stuff. And that's perfect stuff to be passed on for use by other families. So that is our customer profile at this point. And I'll tell you a sweet, sweet story, and I feel like such an auspicious beginning for us. Our first sale a couple weeks ago was to an aunt whose niece had lost a beloved lovey on a weekend outing the weekend before. And so the aunt had gotten on the internet and started doing a search. And it just turned out, she struggled to find it in other places, but it turned out that we had that item practically brand new. It had not been very well loved by the previous owner. And so she was able to get that from us at a really great price, and I was able to send that to her and communicated via email with her afterwards. And she described a picture of her niece when the package arrived, grabbing onto, it was this stuffed giraffe that's actually about 24 inches tall, so I'm imagining like practically as tall as the child, and not letting go of it for hours. And that just warmed my heart. I thought, this isn't exactly what our mission is, but it certainly was just a wonderful byproduct that really made me feel great.
And it's so funny how when we're younger, we kind of latch on to certain little items like that. I remember my sister had a stuffed monkey. His name was Monkey Doodle, and Monkey Doodle went everywhere. So let's talk about the nuts and bolts of the startup world from a financial standpoint. Can you share with us where you're at there, what some of your financial goals are, and are you bootstrapping, all that kind of good jazz?
Yeah, we are bootstrapped, and I hope to not be bootstrapped forever. It is very challenging to build an operationally intensive business of this sort without some financing. So we will be working on acquiring some financing a little bit later in the year. But up until now, I'm going to go out on a bit of a limb here and say, as grueling as it can be to try to get a business off the ground without very much money, there is an upside. And the benefit is that you really have to experiment, and you're really careful with every penny you spend, and there's no waste. You don't have the luxury of waste. You're doing the best that you can with what you've got. And I think that actually makes for a really resilient company and really resilient founders. And I'm actually pleased to have been forced to go through that process, as difficult as it has been.
Well, it sounds like thriftiness is just kind of part of your general nature as a whole.
Perhaps.
And you mentioned financing. So do you plan to borrow money, or are you looking for investors?
We're looking for investors. I'm going to open a seed round in the fall and hope to raise sufficient money to get us through 18 months of building the company and to a milestone, and where we're prepared to begin scaling into other markets.
Yeah, and it just seems like the e-commerce model would require more capital than your initial vision.
Yes. Our initial vision actually did not require a great deal of capital. We were able to push that out. It was a platform, and all we had to do was try to get users on it. It wasn't effortless. I mean, it did require a significant amount of effort, but now we're into a model which actually requires significant operations, meaning we have to handle all of this gear, and we have to have a space for it, and we have to be able to ship it and so forth. So definitely much more operationally intensive, and thus requires financing.
And I would think some considerable storage potentially.
Yes, that's exactly right. And considerable storage requires some certain amount of money.
So do you feel comfortable sharing some of your numbers? It's perfectly okay if you don't want to do that. I know that's...
Do you mean in terms of what we intend to raise?
Yeah, what you're going to raise. How much money do you anticipate needing until your break-even point? And what are some of your projections? All that kind of good stuff. Because this is very time-consuming just to calculate, and gut-wrenching in some ways, because you just don't know for sure.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I anticipate the raise to be $800,000, and my expectation is that would get us through 18 months of growth and building of our company. Break-even would not happen before then. Break-even looks to be more like year 2 or year 3.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what are some of the other challenges that you're facing?
Well, that's really the biggest challenge right now. Being bootstrapped and not having much revenue just yet, it's hard to bring on any staffing, so we can't staff up, and the 3 founders are having to do an awful lot of work right now. So, yeah, I think I have to say that I feel actually as though we're pretty good with our hacks and with what we've managed so far. So the challenges, aside from financing, will definitely be to hit that operational efficiency that allows the company to be profitable and do that in a socially responsible way. So, yeah, that's a challenge going forward. But right now, it's mostly being able to really get off the ground before financing.
Mm-hmm. And do you have some wins that you can share with us?
Oh, wins, yeah.
I think a big thing that comes to mind is when did you have that light bulb moment that this needed to be on an e-commerce platform?
Well, that was back in May, and we knew that we were struggling with user engagement on our peer-to-peer platform. And we actually started into one pivot where we were going to keep the peer-to-peer platform, but we were going to bring in a somewhat overly complicated point system that we thought would encourage people to be more active. And kind of right in the middle of that, I was talking to some advisors and potential investors and mentors and came to the conclusion that that was not going to solve the problem, that what people really needed was greater service, more convenience. They needed a lot more help in making this reuse happen. So that was when the light bulb went off. I had spoken to a founder of a startup that actually did not survive, but was around from around 2013 to 2016 and used this similar model for furniture. And she reported that it worked really very well for furniture. And I thought, wow, this is exactly what we need for toys and baby gear. And so we just very quickly pivoted a second time before even executing our first pivot. And here we are.
Mm-hmm. Have you found others to partner with? I would think that there's a slew of organizations, family-type organizations that can help get the word out.
Yeah, what we really want to do in terms of the partnership, there's so much work to be done. We're just getting started. I mean, literally, we opened up our store 2 weeks ago. But we really want to partner with some of those companies and agencies that can help us with merchandise that we are not able to sell because our consigners want that inventory to stay in reuse. However, we can make that happen. So we're looking at charitable organizations, which I can tell you many of them, the world is so inundated with toys. Mm-hmm. Many of them don't even want donations of toys. Mm-hmm. But there are some companies that are now innovating with the recycling of plastics, including plastic toys, and making that plastic into other items like children's chairs, for example. And I apologize, the name of the company that's doing that escapes me right at this moment. But we want to partner with those so that we can, on that end of our business, that we can really fulfill our mission to keep things out of landfill. And yes. Mm-hmm.
I just need to ask you, because we're out of time once again.
Oh, okay.
How might listeners find you?
Okay, well, there's two ways that you could communicate with me. One would just be through our website, which has a contact form, and that's www.toycycle.co, TOYCYCLE.co. You can also email me directly. I'd be happy to hear from anybody, any thoughts, suggestions, feedback, ideas. And it's Rhonda, RHONDA, at toycycle.co.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. Love what you're doing.
Thank you.
This is Heartstock, and we shall see you next week. Peace. Thanks for listening.
Heartstock Radio is a production of KBMF 102.5 Butte America Radio. Hear our live programs every Friday at 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time via livestream at butteamericaradio.org.